In February of 1980, University of Illinois Chicago students Marco Pizzotti and Santiago Durango formed a punk band. After some initial lineup changes, most notably Marco's younger brother Jeff as lead singer, who was required to have his Afrobeat cut into a more punk-suitable hairstyle, the band was named Naked Raygun, a play on the classic punk band Sex Pistols. The band's main lineup for their golden years would be Jeff Pizzotti on vocals, John Haggerty on guitar, Pierre Kesdy on bass, and Eric Spicer on drums. They would go on to become the most important and successful Chicago punk band.
Rat Patrol. So many times we say, what do we know?
And I was born and raised in Jersey City and Hoboken, just across the Hudson River from Manhattan, and I didn't know anything about Chicago. And I saw Naked Raygun play a couple of times at Maxwell's, which was a small club of about 200 capacity in Hoboken. And I mean, I saw these guys who seemed to be about 7 feet tall, broad shoulders, the cliche goes, and, sculpted hair and just chiseled physiques making this gigantic sound. And I said, oh, that's Chicago.
I think I first heard about Naked Raygun when I was maybe like 11 or 12 years old. I remember getting a cassette from a friend of mine that had their first 2 albums on it, All Rise on one side and Throb Throb on the other side. I think it was, at the time, I remember the first time I heard Naked Raygun, it felt really fresh and different. It had that raw energy to it, but also the really melodic aspect of the vocals. So it really was unlike anything else that I was listening to at the time, and it felt kind of cool and different. Yeah, I think to outsiders, people might find like the punk rock community maybe a little off-putting or threatening, but the reality is the Naked Raygun community has always been really warm and inviting, super accepting, and it's a great commonality. In fact, I just recently met somebody who was a fellow Naked Raygun fan all these many years later, and we instantly bonded and knew that we had like something really special in common.
Naked Raygun were never a traditional punk band, with their much more melodic approach to music than many other punk bands of the time, and their message was unique as well. They were playing in the 80s, a time when nuclear Armageddon seemed to be imminent, and many were discontent with Reagan's presidency. Many punk bands were blatant in their messaging, while Raygun was a bit more subtle in their decrying of 1980s American politics and culture.
And Raygun was giving voice to those things without the Sturm und Drang of a political punk band like Dead Kennedys, who just weren't any fun. Naked Raygun had whoa-whoa-whoas. They were talking about important things, and they were saying simultaneously, my friend, but don't listen to us. What poor gods we do make. They were saying, think for yourself. And I just thought they were fucking brilliant.
Yeah, lyrically, Naked Raygun, they have some politics intertwined. They definitely were about, like freedoms and empowerment. And so I think that definitely had an influence on the way that I viewed the world and felt like, standing up for what's right and believing in yourself and believing in what to be the truth. I think that definitely helped shape the way I looked at the world as a young person.
In 1989, lead guitarist of Naked Raygun, John Haggerty, who had been with them since 1983, left the band over disputes of the direction and leadership of the band and was replaced by Bill Stevens. In 1990, they would then record and release what would be their final recording for many years, Raygun, Naked Raygun, which received mediocre reviews due to lackluster songwriting, muddy sound, and Bill Stevens simply not being John Haggerty. The following year, in 1991, Spicer and Stevens would both leave the band, and with no official announcement to their disbanding, they would play their last show at the Riviera.
I really think in the early 90s, as the nascent alternative scene was kind of coming together, I mean, there is no ray gun in Smashing Pumpkins. There is no ray gun in Urge Overkill, although those guys knew each other. There is no ray gun in a lot of that stuff. I think they were a very strong influence there in the late 80s, mid 80s, and then it petered out for a while, and then there was a good 10 or 15 years before the resurgence came back.
I think that Naked Raygun played a really important part in Chicago music history, and I think that we know that they've had a ripple effect and an influence. Dave Grohl famously kind of said they were the reason he got into music. He saw them at the Cubby Bear when he was just a kid, and said, "Hey, this is what I want to do." So I know they have a lasting impact. They don't play out anymore, and so I think that just because of that, and because of the way that they approached music, I think that their impact, their presence is definitely fading. It's becoming a little bit, obviously more of a legacy act, and people still have very fond memories, but it doesn't feel maybe quite as present as it used to.
While the era of Naked Raygun was over, Chicago punk did not die. Chicago still has a thriving punk scene with a new, non-traditional youth wave taking over in recent years, with bands like Lifeguard and Horse Girl, and the fanzine Hallo Gallo being a flagship for this wave.
Well, I mean, I think I took a different path than a lot of people, so I made compromises. Like, I dropped out of high school, like, not even halfway through high school, It was, like, during the pandemic, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Like, it feels like there's enough in my musical life that I could go for it. So I didn't have, like, that classic high school education. And then I tried to do college, but I haven't had time to do it, so I've just been playing music. So, there's trade-offs and everything. But I think if you really feel like you want to go for something creatively, you can make it work, and it's just like, there is no correct way to live, especially if you're a creative person. So I think, I can be jealous of friends that, like, have a more steady life or whatever, that like go to school and they're gonna get a degree, and it's, that I can envy that in a certain way, but I also do find, like, urgency and, like, importance in what I'm doing. So I think at this point it's fair to say, like, that's the path I've chosen. When I started, it was just me and, like, probably, like, 4 other people that I knew, and then I think they're, like, going to open mics, and a lot of it will be people playing ukuleles, playing, like, Ed Sheeran, and it, that's great, but it's not, like, what I connected with. But you start seeing, like, bands and stuff, and I don't know, like, I met Horse Girl, like, and they were like, oh, this sounds like Sonic Youth or something, and so that, that was, like, another 4 people, and then all their friends, and that's another. It's just, like, I think, like, playing shows, and we have, like, such access to so much music now. It used to be only zines, but now we have, like, also, like, the internet and stuff. Not that there isn't a place for zines, obviously, and, like, zines are, like, somehow, like, so still magical, and, like, I don't know, it's such a great way to, like, find music too. And then Hallo Gallo is, like, seems like I'll just do that as long as I can, because it just feels like a super important sense of connection that I am putting out into the world.
Yeah.
Like, and stuff. So yeah, I hope as long as I can do it, you can't take anything for granted, but I'm gonna keep on doing it as much as I can.
The future of Chicago punk is bright. According to Songstats, Naked Raygun's followers on Spotify continues to rise, despite their inactivity. But Raygun does not stand alone, with the future of Chicago punk safe in the hands of musicians as passionate as Kai, keeping true punk alive. But just what is true punk?
But I think punk is an attitude more than it is anything else, and that attitude is both, I'm happy to be alive, I'm going to jump up and down, and fuck you.
The essence of like DIY, to a degree that it leads into like this passionate revolt. Like there needs to be some sense of like believing in some sense of DIY very strongly, and that generally leads to some form of not necessarily aggression, but it's just like this level of passion that's
like a ferocity.
very focused. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of like punk bands that you could say are not technically punk because, like, technically the Sex Pistols were not punk because they were like manufactured or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You could get into that, but I think like I don't know. It just seems like when punk was made, it was naturally a reaction against like the excesses of like prog rock and like really like arena kind of huge bands at the time. So like at that time, punk was what had to happen from like the DIY culture.
Mm-hmm.
But DIY culture has like existed for a long time. It's just that point in history it reached kind of a pinnacle where it was more realistic that people could actually start creating this kind of scene off of it. So I think that's that kind of that DIY attitude is like the first step to any punk band,
I think for me, punk probably defies a musical genre and is more about an attitude. What I've always admired about punk music is just it's that that do-it-yourself attitude. It's expressing some ideas that you're passionate about and going out there and doing it. I think that's something that still rings true today as it always has.
I think it's an attitude and an ethic. We are our fans. Our fans are us. We are not up here being worshipped in the spotlight on stage on a pedestal. Hello, Billy Corgan. We're not rock stars. We are you. You are us. And you can do this. Patti Smith, 1975. This is the era where everybody creates.
So, what's the meaning of punk? Well, as Naked Raygun said in one of their most popular songs, I don't know.